Number one, navigating your emotions. Number two, being selfless, understanding that as you become a man, your job is to die, right? Jesus said, if you want to follow me, take your cross.
Yeah.
The entire gospel is a love story that at the end ends in our death so that we can live in him. And for me, being a man is being ready to die at all times. And that's emotionally, that's physically, that's mentally. There's some thoughts that we have to kill, dude.
Yeah.
And as men, we have to be brave enough to understand our job is to die as much as possible on a daily.
All right. Hello, and welcome to the High View Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the creative, the outside thinker, and the believer. Disclaimer, if you are a woman, this is not for you. This is a guy's episode. This is a Saturday. Saturdays are for exclusively what?
Boys.
So if you are a woman, you can see your way out. You probably don't want to hear these conversations. Peace out. But today, we are going to have a men's episode. I have some of my good men, brothers here, and we're just going to talk about some guy stuff. Just guy conversation, probably some conversation that guys aren't used to having, and we want to make it a usual thing. So we're going to have those kind of conversations. But first of all, how are you guys doing today?
I'm good. Happy to be here.
I've kind of been running around. I wasn't as prepared as I was last time. So. I was running around trying to find the SD card, trying to get the lights. I couldn't find the SD card, and now we got it. But wow, okay. I just sat down.
Now we take a breath.
Yeah.
Off the mic there.
Yeah, it's good to see you guys. You guys been good since the last time. I know last time we recorded an episode and it didn't work out. So one of the cameras shut off and the other one was like really zoomed in to me and Anthony. So we just decided to redo this. And once again, appreciate you guys for taking the time out of your schedule to do this again.
Yeah,
For sure.
I know it takes a lot to drive out here and all that stuff. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
No, it was a fun drive. We all came in together, so we were all just chatting.
Yeah. Except for the crazy traffic down the street from your house.
Was it bad?
Bro, there was like military and everything out there.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, this is rough.
Yeah, I went on a run. Me and Evan went on a run this morning, and at that bridge, there was like 6 Army guys doing like a checkpoint. I was like, what the heck is going on?
Yeah.
I forgot there was an air show today.
We're getting quarantined.
Yeah, right. They're about to shut us down.
That eclipse.
Military law.
It's time
Yeah,
for the eclipse to kick in.
the eclipse is kicking in, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so today we want to just hop on and have a guys episode, talk about some things that men go through, talk about some just men topics. And it could be very open, just like last time. We can flow wherever we want, but I do have like a skeleton in my head of where we could land and where we could where the route could go. So the first thing I want to hit, and I know we hit this last time at the very last, but I think it'd be a good move to hit it at the beginning. And I want to talk about porn to start with.
Yeah.
I want to talk about why men watch porn. And I would like to hear all of y'all's perspective, because I think one good thing about having a bunch of different people and having these availability spots of having 4 people on here, you get 4 different perspectives. Yeah. So in y'all's perspective, what is something that causes a man to watch porn, or what induces that? What's behind that? What's behind a guy that actually has that trigger to watch that or want, or what starts it?
If we're going to the original reason, I don't think anybody just randomly picks up in their mid-20s. I think typically it's coming in when you're younger because it's a curiosity.
Yeah.
And you want that question answered, and you find a free way to do it where nobody will know about it.
Right.
And you're also not privy enough to realize what it's going to do to you in the long haul because people don't talk about it.
Yeah.
So you don't know any better. You don't know what you're signing up for, that contract that you're signing when you're young.
Right.
So I think it's the same way. We wouldn't let somebody sign into a contract until they're 18, but you're signing a contract right now for something that's debilitating when you get older. And I think it's just because of lack of information.
I think for a lot of people, it's interesting the season that you kind of get introduced to it, because it's when your imagination is at its biggest, right?
Yeah.
You're younger and your imagination is going and you're creative. most of us are still playing with action figures or whatever, and we can create these worlds or whatever it may be, or video games, anything like that. So when porn is introduced, we're usually at a younger age where our imagination has the ability to make things that aren't real. So when we start and we fall in that, or we see it, or we're exposed to it, or whatever it may be, our imaginations, they cling to that, and that becomes a real thing for us. And it creates desires. It creates the mentality that, like you said, it just creates the thought of curiosity. Like, is this what it's going to be? And for a lot of people, when they're exposed to pornography, they're not even sexually active. So it's that mentality of, oh, is this what sex is going to look like?
Yeah, and I would say even from like my own perspective, like I was shown it at very, very young age. Like I think I was younger than 8 years old when it got shown to me. And of course it got introduced from someone else, a close family friend, right? They were a little bit older than me, right? But still, they're like, oh, hey, let's go look at this. And again, it messed with my imagination. And it has been something that through the years, it also then mixed in for me, at least, like with, mixing that in with masturbation, right? It then turns into a physical release, and us being sexual beings that we are, then mixes in with frustrations and all that to then long for that physical release of that, and then leads again to being shown porn at such a young age.
Yeah,
I think it ties back around when you're older. You go back to it because it's a lack of responsibility. It was the same way you thought it was okay when you were younger, because you obviously knew to hide it. You didn't know what you were kind of asking for when you were getting into it. But now when you're older, it's like a lack of responsibility, especially if you are married or in a relationship. It's a relationship with yourself. It's a selfish release of not having any expectations for the other person. You can do it exactly how you want to. And I feel if we talked about that more, that it is just selfishness, we could shine a different light for men to actually have some power over it. Because I don't think any man wants to be selfish or to admit that they're weak, but that's really what it is. It's an act of selfishness because you don't want to perform, or you don't want to deal with that, or an excuse of I need this, or I have sexual desires and I can't. And we just lie to ourselves and we make excuses for it.
And it comes from a place of isolation, right? Because when you were younger, you're watching it by yourself, or like you said, in secret. So when you get older, it's such a structure of what you did in your childhood that anytime you go back to that isolation, it's the first thing in your mind, because you're like, I have a couple seconds, no one's around, things like that, things of that nature. So it's one of those things where, like, if it was brought up in the dark, so when you get older and you start having those seasons of darkness, it's the easiest thing to go back to, because it's a structure that you develop. Of dark season.
Yeah, I think all you guys touched on one of like the same things of it kind of starts when you're young.
Yeah.
And I think men or boys, we're all made a specific way, and that's one of the ways that we're made is very sexually active. Like, we're made to always have that sexual want. And I think one of the world's plans, I guess you could say, or attacks against men is to introduce that at a very young age to stop what it actually should be. What the devil does is pervert things and replicate things in a way to change things for the bad. So I think it's very important to note that it does start at a young age, and we have to acknowledge that it is an attack on the man itself.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think in speaking in an older sense, I think when you do it, or when you have that craving, you kind of have a void that needs to be filled.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men that need that void filled, there's something that has been broken in the past.
Absolutely.
There's a relationship that has been betrayed in the past, and now you have an issue, or there's something missing that you have to fill with getting a woman on your screen. Yeah. And now you have a woman on your screen without even having effort. You have a woman right where you want her without even having to put the effort or having to go through the process of trusting another woman. And also when it has the ability to, it's just like when you do a drug, when you go working out, for example, or anything that you have in your life that you do on a constant basis that can qualify as like a habit or an addiction. It's the same process, because what pornography does is it releases dopamines, even like the process of viewing it, not even the process of orgasm, the process of viewing it has some type of dopamine release. So when your body learns that doing this process or looking at pornography releases this dopamine. Dopamines pretty much rewire your brain. So when you're getting dopamines released, it's pretty much rewiring your brain saying, oh, this is good. So when you're working out, you get those dopamines released, then you start to form a habit. It's like, oh, okay, my body realizes this is good, so I'm going to go work out more. I get in the habit of working out. When you stop working out, it's like something's off. I'm having withdrawals in a way.
Yeah, and I've heard of it kind of portrayed like this, but it's a discipline. And discipline is kind of like a game of tug of war. And we like to say that if we mess up once, let's just keep giving into it. But it's a game of tug of war. You can be disciplined and say no to even just the curiosity, like you said, like that you brought up, just viewing it. Because sometimes we make justifications to give into our curiosity, but I'm not gonna have a completion. I'm not gonna do any of that. But I'm just curious about this. And a lot of times, especially with TikTok and Instagram, it's just constantly
It's everywhere.
polls and polls. Okay, well, there's a link.
Yeah.
There's a link in the bio. I'm just gonna look and we'll see what. So you can see things like that, but it's a discipline. It's a game of tug of war. You can pull it so far on your side, and you're going to get to a point where you pull that other side off, and you win. When we make up this thing that if we give in a little bit, that's okay as long as we don't complete. But every time you make a mistake, you're going back towards the other side.
Yeah.
And I like that you brought up the last point as well. Is you have to identify the triggers for it, because everyone's going to be different. And some people it could be loneliness. Some people it could be a broken relationship that you're still trying to give yourself validation from, and that's where you're going to get it from, because the other side can't talk back. But why do you do it?
Yeah.
I know I can speak, because even being married, I struggled with it for years into my marriage, and I don't think you ever stop struggling with it. I think it's always going to be right at your door the second that you drop your guard. But a lot of it for me was stress, and you can have that conversation and encourage the conversation with your spouse about what's going on, because they're supposed to be there to help you, and it might be a difficult conversation. But even still, if I'm stressed or she's stressed, I'm not going to be able to go. So I knew that was a big trigger for me. So if I was stressed, I needed to be hyper vigilant about staying away from it and realizing what your triggers are and what doesn't trigger you. So you actually can build that wall and start to get a game plan for anything else. Just like you need motivation for the gym or anything else, like you were saying, you need to have a game plan of, identify what causes and what pulls you in the easiest. So if it's stress or isolation, or you get in a fight with your spouse if you are married or dating, and you know what that is, keep yourself away from it. Throw your phone away from you.
One of the reasons it's so detrimental is just because when you watch porn, and I'm sure we've all walked through it, right? Like everybody's experienced that. When you do watch porn, it brings shame. It brings something like you want to hide. You don't want anybody to find that out. It's not like, I just watched porn. What's up, man? And we just had that moment go on, but it's kind of a shameful thing. And I think the reason why it's so detrimental is because when you do watch porn, it releases those dopamines, and your body's now learning that a shameful thing and a pretty much dishonoring thing brings dopamines. So now your body knows, like, when I do this process over and over, I'm going to get that dopamine high. And it's really like bringing you down more and more every time. It's so detrimental.
Yeah, I think a big thing is access. Like, now it's accessible everywhere, right? You can find it everywhere. You can see it everywhere. But to go to your point, I think it's not just shame. I think it's fear. I think as men, we struggle with fear. And as men, it's really hard for us to say we're fearful because we're so bold and we're so brave, right?
For sure.
But the truth of the matter is, the reason why there's shame is because we're fearful of what's on the other side of it. It's something that we've been roped with, or like you said, the tension of fighting it for so long that we don't know what's on the other side. And for some men, it's fear of, if I don't have this, what do I replace it with?
Yeah.
And I think that for men that struggle with it, or even people who don't, men who have the curiosity but have never struggled with it, I think the biggest thing is understanding that fear is not true. That's false fear. There's people out there. There is relationships you can build. There's communities you can get in, things you can do that will stop that fear of missing out, right? Because that's what it is.
That FOMO.
That FOMO is a real thing, especially in today's generation. It's one of those things where our mentalities are wired like this. It's already there. It's something we're comfortable with. If we're not doing it, what do we replace that with? And what does that look like?
Yeah, and that's any addiction.
Yeah.
When as soon as you try to cut it out, you get that feeling of doom.
Yeah.
Like there's my life is going to be terrible for like because you get that initial response, but it's all fake.
And I feel like that leads also to like fear of accountability as well.
Oh,
so that then pushes other people further away from trying to find that help and reach out to others.
Which is ridiculous because you can look at the statistics and we touched on that before, but it's like a ridiculous amount of people, not just men, but women as well, that do like there's a good chance anyone you come in contact with has had some form of struggle or relationship with pornography
or exposure to it.
or some form of exposure where they would at least understand what you're saying. And I don't think I've ever met a guy that hasn't struggled with it.
Yeah.
So, but we don't bring it up because that's the one thing we're like, we're not going to talk about that.
I think that's the key thing. Exposure is a seed. And a lot of people think, oh, yeah, I've seen porn, but like I've never struggled with it. It can creep in, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Just being exposed to it is a seed being planted.
Yeah.
And if you're
You
not
see the right
watering,
trigger.
and if you're not watering the right things, you might allow the seed of pornography to get watered in your life.
Yeah.
And it comes out of nowhere. And then you don't know how to struggle with it because maybe you didn't get exposed when you were 13, but you've seen it when you were 17. And now you're 28 and you're in a season where you're just watering everything in your garden. Before you know it, you're struggling with pornography because of exposure.
Yeah, I won't name names, but I have a buddy that never struggled with it. I mean, he was exposed to it a little bit, but never
Expose them. Just play. Don't do that.
Never struggled with it until he got married, I think at 24, 25, and was actually, but he was celibate before the relationship and never really had sex prior to it either. But once he started developing that relationship with his wife, and he had that seed, when, relationships, it's not perfect. Sometimes you go a little bit without it, or you guys aren't being intimate, or, things get in the way. That started the struggle for him.
Yeah.
And it didn't come up for 25 years, but he had that original seed placed, and then there was sexual desire placed, and then there was a lack.
Yeah.
And he turned right over to it, and he didn't expect that.
Yeah. Also, as a married man, I know we're all married here. When you do watch porn as a married man, it deplenishes the beauty of your wife.
Yeah.
Because now you have an extra expectation, but the porn that you're watching is so glorified in a way where now when you do go back to regular sex, it's like, well, this isn't as special. It's not.
Yeah.
I can't really see it as. And people, I've even heard stories of people saying like they can't even get turned on with their wives anymore because they've had such a glorified version of what sex looks like.
Yeah.
So now when they go back to their wife and try to make like love how they should, it's like, this is just kind of boring, and that's such a horrible life to live because now you're living in kind of a delusion of what sex and marriage looks like.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that perversion that you mentioned of it. It's just a perversion of what it should look like.
Yeah.
And it's literally the enemy just taking away what God made sex for.
That's exactly
sure.
yeah.
Like literally when God created sex, it was supposed to be the highest expression of love that two human beings can have, right? So when I have sex with my wife, it is supposed to be the purest form of love that I can express to her. And the enemy just took it and diluted it.
Yeah.
Right. So now when we do see it or when we do struggle with it, every time we're doing it, it's not pure.
Yeah, man. And I have a passion for that as well. Getting out of it for me when I broke the actual addiction of it, a big reason for that was John Bevere's when he talks about it and seeing it as like his daughter when he has a little girl, and that's a big thing when you start to see it. Like it's a perversion of what God made beautiful. And God made women way more intricate than he made us.
Yeah, absolutely.
He slapped us together, and then he was like, all right, let's redo this and let's actually make it.
That's why it took so long for Eve to come because like he threw Adam out there, was like, all right, let me take my time with this one.
We need to step back and think about this next one.
But when OnlyFans and all that started kicking up, like that's what kind of started to grind on my heart a bit because there was all these girls that just found a quick way to make money, and it was such a perversion. Like you can just tell the enemy in the world to just grab something and they made it so normal and so okay because you're making money. Yeah. And that really started to like get me angry, and I had to kind of search in that, and that's what broke me off of it, was realizing that it's just the enemy taking advantage of you. Yeah. And then right when you give into it, he shames you for it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, Jeremy Johnson, pastor of Fearless LA, is actually Pastor Micah's brother-in-law. I've been following him for years, and he actually there's a woman that goes to his church. She was like top 0.2% OnlyFans models. Just got saved, just got baptized, completely turned away.
I think I saw a podcast.
Yeah,
I think I saw her too.
Absolutely nuts that that even went down that road. Like she was a pastor's kid, all this crazy stuff. And to me, it's just one of those things where like we have to fight the enemy back on this.
Right.
We really do. And he's gained way too much ground. And it's one of those things where we don't talk about it enough. We don't see it enough. We don't hear it enough. It's not comfortable enough. This should be a natural conversation for men. And we have to get to that point where, you know, we're really fearless about it.
Yeah.
Like we need to take ground back from the enemy in areas like this, and we have to reinstitutionalize the purity of what it is to, number one, be in a marriage, number two, have sex in a marriage, what that looks like, what that feels like, because we have a generation coming up behind us that are looking at us, and it's our turn now to really set the tone on that.
Yeah.
Because we've been slipping, man. Like this generation's,
It's facts.
they're fighting some stuff we didn't have to fight 10 years ago.
Well, it's because of the internet too.
Yeah.
Though. Like the
Internet's changed the
yeah,
world,
it's.
bro.
I mean,
And
we all grew up with it when
Yeah.
it was just up and coming. Really,
When it was
And
dial up, you had to plug it in and
Social media.
yeah.
social
media,
as well.
yeah, that's really what it is. I mean, like, I'd say like 80 to 90% of like the hate that you see in the world is just social media. If you
Yeah.
get off the phone, go outside, people are pretty cool. We get along pretty well, you know.
You know, I always tell my brother that because he's very doom and gloom at certain times. But I haven't been on social media for a while now, so I have a completely different perspective, especially living in Texas too, because everyone's just a bit nicer here and everyone wants to have those conversations. But you live
Southern
somewhere,
hospitality.
yeah, you live in Florida. Everyone's pretty mean, everyone's pretty standoffish, and you're always hearing about. You know, you're on TikTok and Instagram, and you're watching the news and stuff. The world just seems like it's going to hell in a handbasket.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if you just put the phone down and go out and talk to people, you realize that it's just the loud minority.
Yeah.
The majority is not thinking
Yeah.
that. The majority is not that
Yeah.
perverted. They're not that
Yeah.
loud.
But they're loud. And
They're loud.
that's where we lose
Yeah.
ground.
Yeah.
They're louder than us.
Yeah.
They're really loud.
Yeah, so that's kind of like we dipped into a little bit of like another question that I want to ask, and not like directly, but it ties into this question, like what makes a man a man? Like, how do you decipher how a man's characteristics are from a boy? You know, what stands out to somebody to say like, oh, that's actually a man right there?
Yeah.
I think it's discipline.
Yeah.
I think that's the number one thing. If you don't have discipline as a man, I can't remember the saying right now, but an undisciplined or an emotional man is a scary man.
Yeah.
If you just give into your feelings, and that's why, you know, everyone always, they kind of went too far the other way of men should never cry to men need to show their feelings. You don't want a man that's emotional, that'll just show his feelings whenever, because that's a dangerous guy.
Yeah.
You want a man that's disciplined and that can understand, can hold himself back and control himself,
Yeah.
but can still be vulnerable in the moments with the people he needs to
Right,
be. So if
right,
you're married,
right,
that's
yeah.
your wife,
Yeah.
or maybe you've got one or two close friends. You shouldn't be breaking down in the middle of the Kroger parking lot with a bunch of people around you. That's not the place for it.
Yeah. I think the verbiage on it is a man who knows how to navigate his emotions.
Yeah.
Men have to navigate emotions. Boys don't. Boys, they can be mad, sad, whatever string of emotions, and they don't have the accountability to manage it.
Mm-hmm.
Becoming a man means you have to take a introspective look at yourself and realize that you have emotions, that it's okay to feel, but you have to navigate them and navigate them accordingly. Boys are selfish. Men are selfless. We have to understand that we're in a position where we are called to lead.
Yeah.
Where even in singleness, we are called to lead, right? Because we have to be what we want to attract. We have to be.
Exactly.
So if we're single, you have whatever it is that you're looking for in a woman, you have to have those characteristics. I know when I met Abby, one thing was that when I looked at her, she showed reflections of me, and I understood that anything I wanted changed in her, I had to reflect that in myself.
Yeah, that's so good.
So for men, number one, navigating your emotions. Number two, being selfless, understanding that as you become a man, your job is to die, right? Jesus said, if you want to follow me, take your cross.
Yeah.
The entire gospel is a love story that at the end ends in our death so that we can live in him. And for me, being a man is being ready to die at all times. And that's emotionally, that's physically, that's mentally. There's some thoughts that we have to kill, dude.
Yeah.
And as men, we have to be brave enough to understand our job is to die as much as possible on a daily.
Yeah, I talk to guys a lot. Cousin being one of them, or just some guys that are in that age of wanting to get married. And I feel like the attraction of wanting that relationship distracts them from what they should be doing. Yeah. And I always say,
see it all the time.
Yeah. Why would you ever give your daughter away to somebody? Like, would you give your daughter away to you?
Yeah.
Are you not? Like, you need to be walking and building yourself to make yourself what you want
That's
to
good.
be for the
That's good.
Don't start practicing when you've got the stress of a relationship.
Yeah.
Like already have those disciplines down before you even get in there. And God's not going to bring you one of his daughters when you're acting a fool, when you're out there doing whatever you want. And you say, I'll get serious when I get a relationship.
Yeah.
No one's going to bring up, hey, you know what? I don't have any experience for this job, but if you give it to me, I'll have experience for it.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get that
That's
job.
good. Like I have a daughter, and I would. That is a great mentality. Like, would I give my daughter away to me? And for men, you should take that.
Yeah.
And like, you might not know what it is to have a daughter, but like, my daughter is the world.
If you have a sister,
Yeah. If you have a sister, would you give your sister away to you?
Yeah.
That's a great mentality.
Yeah,
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 for
yeah.
sure. For sure.
That's good. I was gonna say, I think a lot of it comes like, whereas we're talking about this, I think about the word being meek, and like meekness. Now, I feel like a lot of the times the world has kind of changed the connotation of it as being weak, but that's not necessarily the case. Meekness is knowing how to keep your composure,
yeah.
but then also knowing the power you have behind that as well.
Yeah, that's good.
But I think like that's what I think about when we're just talking about being a man, is being able to be meek, but not weak. Again, like this is kind of what I think about.
And humbleness, man. Humbleness is so hard as a man. Like, we are built with pride.
Yeah.
Like we just overflow with that. And I think that like, we're called to be humble, protectors, but humble protectors. It's not about taking territory. It's about understanding the authority that we have in territory. And I think that goes back to managing your emotions. Like, you should come in and be able to manage a room. You're not supposed to come in and take over the room with your personality.
Yeah.
Like, there should be a humble surrender. Like, you come in and you understand, like, hey, my humbleness is what's going to attract people to me. I don't have to go in and be the biggest or the baddest or the bravest. I don't want people to look at me and say, oh, he's a force. I want people to look at me and go, man, whatever that guy has, like, I need that all over me.
Yeah, and I think might be an unpopular opinion, but really any form of exterior pride is just a manifestation of a lack of confidence.
Insecurity.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
So, I mean, anytime guys want to come, they want to bow up, and it's a lack of confidence. If you know that you're confident in an area, or you know you can do a certain thing, you don't have to
You
explain
don't
it.
have to show it.
One, it's a lack of confidence. Two, it's like an open wound that's never been healed as a boy.
Yeah.
And they carry it on their sleeves, quite literally. But for me, I think what walking in manhood looks like is being vulnerable.
Yeah.
And I think all the things that we talked about translates to being vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable enough to be meek in situations where somebody's pressing you, somebody's getting on your nerves. You can't let your pride get in the way. You have to be vulnerable enough to say, like, okay, I can handle the situation. I don't need to freak out. I don't need to let my pride get in the situation. But also on top of that, you were saying, you know, obviously you're not going to be like sharing your emotions to the person in the Kroger parking lot.
Exactly.
You know, so you have to know when to manage that, like you were talking about. You have to know when to put those and apply the vulnerability in situations where you need it the most.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing is with your wife, with your spouse. You know, being vulnerable with your spouse is one of the strongest things that you can do as a man. I think that's what makes a man is being able to be vulnerable. At least in my life, I think pride has been something that has been shown to me in my life, that it's kind of something that's been passed down, and it's something that I have to like put extra effort towards of not being. So vulnerability is kind of big for me, and just vulnerable, even having vulnerable conversations like this is vulnerable. This is like a man should be able to have conversations like this.
Absolutely.
And that makes a man. That's a big part of a man.
Yeah. And being able to recover from failure. I think when we were younger, anytime we failed, it was like disheartening. As a man, when you fail, it should be a lesson, and it should be something that you should take in a positive light. And we're not really taught that. We're taught that like you get one chance to make it all. No, it's not like that. Like, you can fall 100 times to get back up 100 times.
just about getting
It's
up.
the posture of your heart when you do it. Like, you gotta want to be better. And as a man, you have to look at yourself yesterday and be better today than you were yesterday, right? And we struggle with that because we think that once we fail, it's over. I'm going.
Yeah, failure should not detract from the goal.
Yeah.
It's so funny. Like, we have these snaps. Even when you said vulnerability, my brain went, I just don't like the word.
Yeah.
The word just feels soft. And
I think
for something in my flesh, I'm just like,
a lot of
no.
men have a negative annotation towards the word vulnerability, or even like emotions. Like, emotions are just like a kind of a cuss word to men.
Yeah.
But it's not that we don't have them or we can't have them. It's just like we need to know how to navigate them. We need to know how to navigate it in a healthy way, the way a man should.
Yeah.
I was telling my wife all the time that I'm not emotional, which is a complete lie because I'm very, but I'll say I'm very passionate.
You're the most emotional man.
You are.
In a good way, though. It's a very good way.
Right, but I always wanted to deny that part. I would say I'm passionate,
Yeah, very passionate.
but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
No matter what I'm doing, when we had a conversation about it as well, I just got really good at taking every emotion, converting it to anger, and then just crunching it up until I needed to deal with it in some form of fashion, whether it be the gym or some form of outlet. But yeah, I was super emotional.
And
You just won't see it.
And I would say to add to that, so like even for myself, that's something I always tell my wife as well. It's like, hey, like, and she's actually pointed it out to me. It's something I've been like really trying to grow in as well, is expressing my emotions. Because again, I feel like I'm very passionate, right? Like to say I'm very passionate, but a lot of times I let that turn into anger or frustration instead. And that's actually something I've noticed from my father and his father, you know, and that's something that just kind of got passed down because, again, that's the example I was given, right? So trying to really take that, unlearn that, and then actually work through it and express myself correctly.
Yeah, I never saw my dad express sadness.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, it was the opposite. I never really seen my dad's emotions. So when I started getting them, I had no clue what to do.
Yeah.
And it was really hard for me to figure it out. And honestly, it took a lot of just me working on me. And I didn't realize it until I got saved that I had so many problems that I could work through. I thought my entire life I was walking through life and this is just the cards I was dealt. This is what I have to deal with. I guess I just got to play the best hand. It's not like that. There are things you can work on. You can work on your inability to cope with emotions. You can work on your ability to be overwhelmed by emotions, things like that. Right. You can do work in yourself. And I always thought that I was a finished product, right? Because we have this lie that literally, when life gives you lemons, right? That's what we're told. No, like, you smash them, you make lemonade. But no, like we can go against the grain. Like you can work on yourself. You can get better. You can be smarter. You can get stronger. You can manage better. Like men, we are literally, our potential is infinite. We are the ones that set the tone, and it starts in our mind. We have to have that mentality, like, I can get better here.
I like that you touched on that, of you didn't know what to do with them, and I feel like that's the number one thing. And I'm not an advocate at all for it's okay to be how you are, but men need to realize that it's okay to feel things. And also, it's okay to be vulnerable, especially with your wife. Sometimes I say this all the time, like, I will cry in front of my wife when I'm going through something. Sometimes I won't if she doesn't need to. She can't help in that situation. But sometimes I'll do it, and I'll go into the room just to show her, because your wife needs to know that you're vulnerable. She needs to feel that she's not the only human in the house.
I just see you walking in a room with tears like, like, what did I do?
Are we good?
And like we're
take him back in. No, but like your wife needs to feel that you're also vulnerable. That there's two humans in the house and that you're both going through things. I feel like a lot of times we want to protect our wives from that, but it makes them feel isolated emotionally. And then they're not going to want, especially depending on the personality type of your wife, they're not going to want to bother you, and they're going to feel weird. They're going through all these things and they're stressed out, and they never see it from you. So sometimes it's good. I think it's good at times to go to your guys in certain scenarios. I don't think you should pour everything out on your wife. That's part of being a servant leader. We have to take some things on the back.
For sure.
But also, we need to tell young men and young women, because my entire life, it was, if I got angry, there was no understanding.
Yeah.
You know, my sister, when she started going through puberty and stuff, and she was like, she's basically debilitated for a week, and everyone just had to understand it. We all understood that that's fine. It's her time of the month. But when I would get angry, everyone looked at me like I was the devil. Like I was like, they didn't understand what was going on with me. I had issues. But I touched on this before. Like we talk about women's hormones, and when they go through menstruation, they have all those heightened emotions and things like that, and their testosterone raises to minimal levels compared to what a guy walks around with. I think it's like, don't call me on, but like I think 80 or something like that, like free range testosterone.
Somebody fact check that.
And
Put it
then don't put it in the comments. Just live with that truth. But men walk around, especially. I remember when I got my physical when I was like 14. I had like 950 or something like that, just walking around at all times, and I have no idea how to control my emotions.
Yeah.
So the fact that I was only yelling was a grace of God. Like, who knows what I could have actually gone out and done. And like, boys are little monsters. They are. But if you actually teach them that it's okay to feel like this, it's normal.
Yeah.
Now let's just work on how we need to have outlets for that, because it's not going to go away.
Yeah.
You don't need it, and you can't get rid of it. There has to be an outlet for it, and teaching healthy outlets for those hormonal induced outbursts. Like that's just how men operate.
I think it's trying to teach young boys to have a growth mentality instead of a victim mentality and staying in that.
That's good. That's really good, especially in this generation.
Yeah.
Because I think falling victim is kind of the more natural state to go towards instead of, like exceeding from it and learning from it. Like you said, learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
It's more of just like something happened to you, now live with it. And that's your title now.
Yeah, and honestly, the victim complex comes from pride. Like we feel entitled. Like, I'm allowed to have this. Like, no, you're allowed to have it, but don't sit in it.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, what is the plan? What's next for you? Like, you got that emotion, hold it, have your 15 seconds of fame. Let's get better. Let's grow from that. And it goes back to the pride and the entitlement. And as men, we feel like we've put in enough work to get back from life. And the truth of the matter is, it's a constant battle. It's a constant tension between I'm getting better and I'm staying away from what I was. And we have to learn how to fight that tension, that up and that down, that constant pull. Life is a game of tension. And it's like you're working out in the gym. Where's your growth coming? That tension, those moments. And I think that's how we get stronger and that's how we grow. We have to navigate that tension accordingly. But we have to know what that looks like. And a lot of us don't.
Yeah. Well, I think, and again, I think it's on our generation to help the next one. And actually, because you see a lot, especially the 12 to 16 age right now, there's so much defensiveness.
Yeah.
And I remember that's exactly what happened with me is when you hear enough things being told to you. Like, I wasn't a bad kid. I had a very big heart, but I had anger issues and I would have outbursts, and my family would just speak things over me and say things over me that eventually I stopped trying to be nice. Yeah. If you guys have this image of me, then that's just who I'm going to be. Because clearly it's going to be a lot more fun being how you're saying that I am. Yeah. So I stopped caring and I got really defensive about it. And then people were like, you're mean. And I just took that as you're right. Yeah. Deal with it. What are you going to do about it? But rather than being like, no, you just say, hey, we gotta control that. And actually saying that, it's all right that you're acting like that. That's not who you are. Yeah. And if I would have just heard that once, 15, 16, that's not who I am. We realize you're just struggling with it. That would have helped so much. You
know what's interesting to me? One of the hardest emotions that men have to learn how to navigate is love. It is really hard, and love can solve a lot of problems. And I don't just mean love between you and a parent, love between you, like interior love. Yeah. Right? We hear the word love, and it's harder for us to accept that we're loved than to accept the fact that we're just angry all the time. So people speak things over our life like, oh, he's a troublemaker. We accept that. We take that. Oh, I love him so much. It's a little bit harder for me. Yeah. Right? And it's one of those things where it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to receive love and express love and navigate love and all that. But as men, it's the last emotion. It's literally in the back of our head. Like, I'm brave, I'm strong, I'm courageous, I'm fearless, I'm this. Oh, and I'm loved.
Well, how many times has that backfired though when you're younger?
Well, that's why it's so scary for us.
You had an image of love and you thought someone did. Yeah. And then it was thrown away like nothing. And you go, oh, okay, so that's all just fake.
Or for people who got saved when they were discovering what love was, because I know I got in a really big relationship as I was building my relationship with God, destroyed my perspective on love. Yeah. Because while I'm building my relationship with God, I'm building my relationship with this person. And every time this person wronged me, I looked at God like, hey, if you put this person in my life and this person loves me and your love and this happens to me, then it means that this is what your love feels like too. And for a lot of people who grew up in church or people who were raised in church, their perspective on love of what God's love to them was their parents. Yeah. Or relationships they had when they were really young. So now when you go to process an unwavering, unconditional love that God has for you, you're processing it through the lens of what you've seen love be like your entire life. Yeah. And before you know it, you're 28 years old and you still don't know what the word I love you means.
Yeah. A lot of times it really is that. Like a lot of people that I talk to, it's especially like with the fathers or even just past relationships like you experience. It's really trying to unwind what you experience from your father or what you experience from that past relationship to actually find out and find the true meaning of how God loves us. Yeah. Because how God loves us is actually what love is. Yeah. So if we know how God loves us, then we know how to express it. We know how to do it for ourselves and we know what the actual meaning is. Yeah. So a lot of times it is people like trying to unwind and undo the process of how they learned what love looks like, especially from a father's stance. And that's very, I'm not a father, but I know that's probably very important. You know, how you show yourself as a father. So because you want to represent what God is in her life as well.
And even deeper, people who didn't have fathers in their life that maybe got attached to a male figure that was a father, whether that be an uncle or, I mean, let's get even deeper, a pastor. I know a lot of people who looked up to youth pastors as father figures, and then that pastor falls, and then where they at? Right? Because to them, that person held a stature of like what God looks like. Like I know people who were attached to youth pastors, and youth pastors fall, and now they don't even believe in God because they invested in the man, and they followed the man for so long. And now their perspective on what God's love is what that person was, which is a fallen love.
And that ties to identity. You put your identity in your relationship with people and not your relationship with God.
Absolutely.
Just leads to all that confusion.
Absolutely. And that goes for leaders. I think that leaders in churches should be expressing the fact that you guys aren't here for me. And there should be a level of vulnerability. Like anyone who steps on that altar, you have to understand that those people aren't here for you. And you have to express that to people. Like, I'm going to fail you 100 times out of 100. You're not here for me. You're here for God. And I think that as people with perspective, we have to be the ones that are sharing that perspective. And we have to give that cliff note. Like, hey, I know you're here and I know you're following, but you're not following me. You're following God.
Yeah, I think we need to get the mentality of glorifying leadership out of there and realize that leaders are supposed to be servants to you.
But I feel like that should also come with the growth of like finding it for yourself as well.
Absolutely.
And understanding it for yourself, because I feel like that's something that isn't talked about as much either. So I think in attaching that again with, you look up to the man on the platform and you attach that identity to that, right? That relationship with God to that person, and they fall, technically it's not that person that fell's fault. It's yours because you didn't build that, cultivate that enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, there's definitely some accountability with that as well, of what you put your eggs in. The basket you put your eggs in? Yeah, I was trying to go for that analogy. But
the eggs you put your basket in?
Yeah, the eggs.
For y'all, like on y'all's personal walk, what kind of, or when was kind of y'all's turning point? Or let me put it like this. At what point in your life did you start to learn how you operate? Like how, like Anthony's high on emotion. When did you find that out? Like, because I think there's a certain point in your life where you have to do like actual soul searching. Especially like any individual, not even just a man, like male and female. You have to do some type of soul searching to know like how you operate. You have to know how God can speak to you. You have to know how you can receive, how you respond to certain things. So, like, at what point in your life did you start to kind of find that out about yourself?
Man, the biography of my life should be trial by fire, because that's literally how I put myself in every situation to grow, is I just commit to something and there's no backup plan. I can't even really pinpoint an age, but I'll say after I got married.
That's good, yeah.
Because
it's usually, I would say that's a pretty big pivotal moment for a lot.
I had no idea what I was doing or who I was until I got married. And then now I had somebody that I was completely responsible for. So there was no quitting. Because I would say, we were talking about this the other day about like when you're ready for marriage, you don't really know, but there needs to be a base. And that base needs to be that you're a servant and that you are already committed to putting somebody above yourself. As long as you're doing that, you're going to react wrong. You're going to have impatience. You're going to make mistakes. But as long as quitting's not an option, and you're going to put that person first. I learned a lot through your spouse pointing it out, or having guys like Christian, and you're doing life with people that will point that out as well and will stay on you. But I mean, I would definitely say when I got married and when I actually had a responsibility in my life that I couldn't get rid of is when I started to actually have to hit the grindstone and commit to things
that you couldn't get rid of as wild.
Yeah.
That was a wild statement.
You're not going anywhere.
For me, it was about 23. That's when like my emotions were starting to balance, all my chemicals were starting to balance. And I knew what drove me. I knew I always wanted to be successful. I didn't know what that looked like. It really came when I just decided that I don't care what life looks like as long as I'm moving forward in it. And it was about 23. I was about 2 years into marriage. My first year was rough. fighting with identity, trying to figure it out. By my second year, one day I just woke up and went, all right, I have to be a husband. And something just clicked in me, and it just all made sense. Everything that I'd had up until that moment, it just made sense. But yeah, I would say around that age, that was around the time where I kind of like settled in and was like, all right, this thing called life, like you only get one shot at this. And when everything's said and done, I lay my head on a pillow, and my biggest fear is not giving it my all. You know what I mean? So yeah, that was probably it for me.
Yeah, for me, I think it's probably right after I graduated college. I graduated college in 2020, right? So it's middle of COVID pandemic and everything, and me sitting there like, man, what did I go to school for all this time? And like actually everything kind of starting to hit me because I'm done with college, and in college, I struggled a lot with alcoholism and just wanting to party, wanting to just throw everything away at times, and actually once I met Caitlin, and we met before I graduated, but kind of realizing again, like, okay, this life, it's not just my life anymore that I have to think about. It's somebody else putting that and actually putting those responsibilities in the picture. So 24, 25 for me. So.
Yeah. I would say the same, like very similar to what all of you guys experienced. It was when another person came in the picture.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very big thing to note in this thing, because a lot of guys want to do it on their own. It's me against me, or it's me against the world. Like, I don't need nobody. I'm going to get to the top. I'm going to make all this money. But it's very, very important to have another person in your corner, whether it's a spouse or just like a guy friend, brother, But yeah, same thing for me. Like right when me and Lex got together, we actually lived together when we were dating. We were a couple years in, but she had moved to Texas because we were doing long distance, and we moved into an apartment. A wreck of a relationship, just always fighting, breaking doors, everything, the whole 9 yards. Her engagement ring came off numerous times. We were those neighbors that you wanted to call the cops on, always yelling. But right when that happened, I started to experience kind of like pulls and reminders, because I grew up in a Christian home. I grew up with God and knowing of God. So when she did come in the picture, I kind of had those pushes to just be a better man, really. Just be a better man and know who God is more. And it was very similar with me too. Like I just had like a breaking point one day, and everything kind of changed that day. Yeah. I just had like more of a realization of like what life is.
Yeah. I heard an analogy like this. It said, if you have two wolves and one's chained up in the light and one's chained up in the dark, which one survives? Whichever one you feed. Right. So inside of us, we have two halves, and whichever one we're feed is what's going to live inside of us. So it's like you said, you're constantly having that pull, like you were just feeding the wrong wolf inside of you at the end of the day. And then one day you wake up and you decide to feed the other one. And then that's when life starts to change. And like, as far as the success thing, like as men, we like to measure success by like material. But the truth of the matter is like success is just having peace.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like enough. We really don't have peace.
What do you gotta say about that?
I want to hear this.
I saw his head tilt.
Yeah, I don't mean like complacency. What I'm saying is you should be able to go through your day and have peace in your heart, knowing that what you're doing, what you're providing, whatever those things look like, that is enough success.
It's a type of success.
It's a type of success.
It's not 100%.
No,
I'm successful.
yeah,
I don't
no.
need anything else in life.
Yeah, no.
Don't take it.
I seen the head tilt. He was like, "Well, if you don't have a job,
No, I am.
Whatever you say, the cup is full, and that's what he takes.
yeah."
No, I just whenever you say anything that I have a rebuttal to, I make that face. But no, you were spot on. I like how you touched on it when you said the peace part. Brother, I haven't felt peace since the day I got married. No,
Lauren, if
I
you're
understand
watching
what you're
this.
saying. I just mean,
All right,
and I like
cut that one out.
No, but I think it's different personalities as well. I think you said it's funny that we all have a similar thing. I don't think it's funny. I think that's just how men work. You need a goal. If we don't have a goal, we fill our time with aggressive nonsense.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it is.
So I think the peace is different though, because like Lauren can bring you peace, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So even though you don't have peace on your day to day, what I'm saying is there's an area of peace in your life, and that should be something to hang your hat on. That's what I meant by that.
And I can say from growing up in my household, that was one thing where I was like never home from the second I got a job till I moved out at 19. Was I felt no peace in my house. It was just I would actually rather be at work than being in my home.
Yeah.
When I got married, Lauren brought peace. Like when I'm with her now, the responsibility of when I actually started to step up, which was like a few years in our marriage, when I stopped being a checklist and I actually started realizing that there was a relationship and there was a family I had to steward. I feel like people hear peace and they think calm.
Move the headset.
Okay. People hear peace and they think calm
Yeah.
and they think easy.
No.
And that's not what it is. I think it's a direction. I think you have peace with where you're going.
Yeah.
It has nothing to do with no stress.
Peace is a pit stop.
Sorry.
It's a pit stop. It's like one of those things where you just check in when you need to refuel. And that's what I do with Abby. Like Abby is peace for me, right? So when I'm going through a lot, she'll know because I'll just lay on the couch or lay on her or whatever it may be. And I'm just kind of, it's like the pit stops in the NASCAR races. Change my tires, clean my windshield.
I'm actually going tomorrow.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's like you jump in and like it's the quickest way to get fixed up, and then you're right back in the race of life.
Yeah, I think
that's
peace.
what it is.
I think peace is a confirmation of direction.
Yeah,
I think in a man's life, I think peace is just a confirmation of direction. You're not struggling. You're not looking. You know exactly what you're supposed to do, and when you have that, you can take moments to just enjoy the relationships. And I want to expound on when you said how men judge success.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's not by actions or anything like that. I think it's the people that you're impacting around you.
Yeah.
Like if you've got people that rely on you or people that you are impacting in their lives, like if your wife is happy and your wife is like truly, she feels, if you're married, like fulfilled, that's success. Yeah. If your friends feel motivated by you, that's success. I think it's the people around you that are feeding off of you that you can pour into. I think that's what measures a man's success.
And I think to add to that, I think it's also important to add, again, having the right people around you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because the people around you will influence you. And, iron sharpens iron, as we know, right? Yeah. So if you have someone around you that isn't making you sharper, isn't bringing you up, then they're going to bring you down.
Cut bad relationships out of your life.
And it's like what we talked about last night. You need to judge people by their fruit.
Yeah.
Like that's it. If I'm around you and you're a married man and I'm a married man and you're not honoring your wife when she's not around, I don't want to be around you because I don't want that in my life. You know what I mean? Yeah. And if you're not a very motivated person and every time I'm trying to motivate us, you're just dragging us down. Like, dude, those are your fruit. You can't get rid of those. The only way you get rid of those is by getting pruned or cut. And you're doing a lot more cutting than you are doing pruning. And I don't want to be around that. And we have to have that ability to look at people's lives and go, do you have something that I can gain from you? And if not, it's okay to go, I'm out.
Yeah,
I get one shot at this game. I can't waste time on someone that's not going to grow with me, that's someone that's not willing to learn from me, with me, or teach me something. I have to be in those relationships where I'm growing, and it has to be organic. It can't be forced. It can't be stress induced. It's okay to say bye to people in your life.
Right, because your failure is not just affecting you.
Yeah.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Well, I would like to close on just emphasizing what you said a while ago, feeding the right wolf.
Right.
Because I think that's a really big part and a very simple and effective way to like have a mindset of. Because when you're feeding the right thing, you're going to go in the right direction regardless. Right. When you're feeding the wrong thing, you're going to go in the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So I think that's something that you can really, the guys who are listening, really stick onto that. Really let that marinate, just over this podcast. Let that marinate as a thought in your life. Let me feed the right wolf. Let me feed the right thing in my life. And I like to use the analogy as a wolf because we are, in a sense, an animal. We need to be courageous. We need to be out there. We need to get it. We need to be fearless, like a wolf. So I think that's great. Feed the right wolf. Don't go down the path of the wolf that brings you down. You want to do everything that brings you up and have Jesus's character and characteristics as your role model. But we'll close this out. I think we're pretty much close to time. Can you see what that says? It's probably in the 50s, right?
53.
We got 7 minutes.
But anyway, we'll close it out. I don't want to go over an hour because if it goes over an hour, it's a whole other thing, whole other project. But we'll close this out. Thank you guys again, just for sharing y'all's knowledge and opinions and perspectives. I think it's so healthy to get other people's perspectives, either if it's in the form of a podcast or just talking to someone one-on-one. So again, thank you guys for sacrificing a time out of your Saturday to come and record with me and let the audience hear your perspectives and all of this stuff.
Not a sacrifice at all, man.
Good to hear. I love you guys. Appreciate y'all.
Love you, man.
We'll see y'all next time. I hope you guys got something out of this episode. All you men, appreciate you guys for listening. We love you guys, and we'll see you guys next time. Until then, see things from a higher view. Peace out.